The fatal murder of Henry Noak is another blinding example of why evidencing things, important things, in the right manner is essential. Henry Noak told the police that he'd been stabbed, but at the time they believed the wrong story. Henry Noak was an 18-year-old student. He had been stabbed multiple times. And whilst he was being pinned to the ground by police, numerous police officers, both male and female, he stated repeatedly and very clearly that he couldn't breathe. But a false story had already been placed in front of them. And instead of Henry being seen immediately as the victim, he was being treated as the perpetrator. Instead of seeing him as the person in need, he was pinned to the floor and handcuffed as he died. Now, I want to be very, very clear about this video. This has got nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with religion. In this video, I am using this horrible incident as an example of why evidencing things in the right way for yourselves is very important, and as we can see, for others too. Most of my viewers are lovely people, just trying to get through what they consider to be discriminative action against them because of their disability, where they feel invisible. Henry's murder, his death, should not be turned into political theatre or content bait, or an excuse to target a faith or a community. But his case and this incident raises a very serious question for each and every one of us. What happens when the evidence is right there before some of the biggest decision makers, like the police, before their eyes, but the person at the time making the decision has already believed another narrative? And in this case, it was the wrong narrative. So the facts are this: Henry Noak was an 18-year-old student walking back to his accommodation in Southampton, December 2025. He was alone, he was unarmed. And as we know, he encountered his perpetrator, who was armed. Digwa, his perpetrator, stabbed Henry multiple times, which led to his death. Now, afterwards, Digwa did not tell the police what he had done. And even the sentencing from the judge describes his narrative as convincing, but an entirely false narrative, an entirely false story, deliberately given to the police. And because of that, Henry was treated from the outset like a criminal, as if he'd committed an offence, handcuffed, pinned to the ground, being taken care of by the police. Now, although his murderer has got 21 years life imprisonment, well, a minimum, let's hope, of 21 years, for Henry's family, this conviction is probably not going to change very much. It's not going to change that in his final hours, him telling the truth that he could not breathe was being ignored. Why does this happen so much in the UK? Now, it is true the person responsible for his death was clearly the murderer. But the institutional failures, they still matter. And they really are a catalyst for so many things in the UK government currently that really do need adjusting. Because particularly in a court of law, once one narrative is at least 55% or more believed by the decision makers, once someone in this case is labelled an aggressor, a liar, a racist, they then become the problem, and that person is then not trusted. And every evidence at that point in front of those decision makers was ignored. And even though Let's just say, even if he had have been doing the things that his perpetrator had stated that he had done, which was not the case, Henry did say he could not breathe. Those words must have been heard. They were evidence. His visible distress must have been seen, but it was ignored. And the fact that he had been stabbed mattered. But the false narrative was the one that pushed through all the decisions at that time for the decision makers, ignoring the blatantly obvious evidence. Now, I listened to the Chief Crime Commissioner on the news this week about this, and I made some notes from her interview. And one of the biggest quotes was this: "In this country, we have a justice system. Let it run its course." That was from Sarah Jones, Minister for Policing and Crime in the UK. Now, what I think is quite shocking is the volume into conscious, just time to understand, and this is a quote, what was driving the behaviour of those officers. She then goes on to state that there is a history of racism in policing, but the first duty is to protect life and problem solve. Well, I think we can all agree that all of those police officers did not follow that at all. So is this really what happened? Do you honestly think that was just bad policing, bad training? Or do you think it's more about social prejudicing making up their decisions before they even wanted to look or contemplate the very obvious evidence in front of them? Now, as we know on this channel, I often talk about the injustice surrounding disabilities, hidden disabilities, mental health, physical disabilities, obvious visual disabilities, and how people are treated around that in the workplace, people that are self-employed, etc., etc. And I am by no means whatsoever comparing a PIP assessment to the death of a young man. Henry's family have suffered an unimaginable loss, and as a parent myself of 2 adult children, more than shudders me. But there is a wider lesson here, I think, about our evidence in systems and our institutions that are mandated to regulate and control them. Many disabled people know what it feels like to be ignored. As disabled people, we are told that we have rights. Now, I remember in one of my recent tribunal hearings when I was suing my last employer, we all know who that was, I had to request 15 times in writing reasonable adjustments to the judge who blatantly ignored them. She did not respond to a single email. That was a judge in an employment law court on a disability discrimination case where the respondent had already admitted and agreed that I had a disability. So why did the judge ignore my 15 emails? Why did I not get a response from that decision maker? Many disabled people know what it feels like to tell the truth about their condition, but yet not be believed, despite medical evidence, despite physical, visual evidence in front of them. Just like Henry Noak, when he was clearly in distress, couldn't breathe, was probably gasping, and there must have been some blood somewhere. For a disabled person to say, I cannot walk reliably without aids, or I cannot walk, or I can only walk a short distance, to then have to battle with somebody who's meant to be medically qualified to then assess them on the one day that they attended an assessment centre. For a disabled person to say, I struggle to prepare food safely, only for somebody else to assume that they look well, they look capable, they must really be managing. It can't be as bad as they're making out. For a disabled person to say, I have various health conditions and this one, it fluctuates quite a lot. Only for that decision maker to ignore that evidence and then take a snapshot of what they think that person struggles with or does not struggle with in a 20-minute assessment. Evidence doesn't always fail because it doesn't exist. It fails, and very often because the person making the decision has already decided on the outcome that they want to happen based on the narrative that they want to believe. So in particular, that is why documenting for disability and health conditions matter. Now, I've seen lots of people, well, not lots, but a fair few in the comments going, if you can fill out a PIP planner, then people are going to think that you're not very well. If you can fill out a PIP planner, then people are going to think, oh, you're capable. Somebody even said that a PIP, like my health journal, would not be entered into evidence. That is 100% completely false. The health journal itself contains various sections in it where you put medical evidence from your healthcare professionals in it. It isn't all about a diagnosis. It's about the impact of your day-to-day activities because of your health. Those are things that a diagnosis will not be able to evidence. Put it in here. Print it out, put it in here, snapshots from your phone, anything that constitute evidence goes in the evidence section. Your monthly assessment logs and your trackers, they are all there so that when somebody wants to disbelieve you, you can prove that you have been keeping a regular and continuous log. And that regularity, that continuity will outweigh a one-time wonder comment. But without it, you're not going to have any evidence to weigh out the narrative that somebody else wants to believe. Now, evidencing your health and disability is not, as the Sun newspaper wanted to try and assert, all about telling people about your bad days. And the Sun newspaper, I am going to be dealing with that, so watch this space. And you can show that in your weekly planner here, which is opposite the fluctuation tracker. It's very important to write down what you're doing week by week. In there, you've also got a section for meds, the meals that you've had, joyful activities, and additional notes. And yes, if you have a disability, and yes, even if you receive something like PIP, which is a disability benefit, yes, you are allowed to enjoy yourselves, guys. People that think you need to hide away in a hole and never be seen by the world just because you have a disability is a very outdated and discriminative, stereotypical narrative that I really hope to keep smashing. But the main point here is that when somebody wants to make a judgment about you, and that judgment is going to impact something in your life quite seriously, you do need to have evidence to make sure you can outweigh those comments, outweigh their written reports. Just imagine this. You're in a PIP assessment. You've been seen for 45 minutes by somebody who doesn't know you, doesn't know anything about your life, has never met you before, has never spoken to you before. And because of that 45-minute recorded, I might add, interview or assessment, they're then going to compile a very nice document called a report. And that will be used against you. And if all you're going to have is, well, I said this, I said that, it's not going to fare very well. That is why I created the health journal. And yes, I've also used the health journal in an employment tribunal as well. So it isn't necessarily for PIP. You can use it for employment situations. You can use it in employment tribunals, PIP tribunals, any type of formal environment. Or just if you're not having any challenges, and that's wonderful if you're not, just keep it for yourself, because that day may come. Disabled people have rights too, but nobody is going to open up the doorway for you to have them. That's why I did the health journal. Now, if you want to go one step further, I do have the Prove It course. It isn't something you're going to do in 10 minutes, but it teaches you the key fundamentals about evidence in health and disability in formal structures. The planner helps you record chronic health conditions, fluctuating conditions, activity impact, recovery time, appointments, treatments, adverse effects, and the real day-to-day evidence that you might one day have to rely upon. Because if you leave your evidence in the hands of others, it can be misused, minimised, or even forgotten. Or dare I say it, ignored. Now, Henry Noak should have been believed. When he said he'd been stabbed, he should have been believed. And his family, they deserve truth. They deserve accountability, and most of all, they deserve dignity. Not speculation of people trying to cause more division through their loss. And I'm not one for violence at all. And I think it's very sad what I've seen happen in Southampton. I understand why people are outraged. I am too. But violence is never ever the solution. When institutions make decisions about people, evidence must be heard properly. Assumptions must never ever ever be allowed to outweigh the truth. And in particular, when you're dealing with organisations like the Department of Work and Pensions, who deal with PIP and other things that many of my viewers are interested in, too often they will go down the rabbit hole chasing an assumption and trying to turn that assumption into a fact. It can only be a fact if there is evidence. So make sure you've got yours and you're able to push it loudly and clearly under the nose of a decision maker so that you and your evidence cannot be ignored.